The champagne flutes catch the light from the chandelier above our dining room table, throwing tiny prisms across my mother's face as she lifts her glass toward my brother. She is glowing. She has been glowing since the moment my brother walked through the front door with his fiancée, since the moment he announced the wedding date over the phone last week, since the moment she began planning a celebration that required the good tablecloth, the crystal glasses, and catered food from that Italian place downtown that she normally calls too expensive. My brother sits at the head of the table, which is technically my father's seat, though my father has been gone for 4 years now. Nobody mentions that. My brother has simply grown into the space my father left behind, filling it with the same easy confidence, the same assumption that the best chair in the room is the one meant for him. I sit to the left of my mother, still wearing the scrubs I changed out of 30 minutes ago after a 10-hour shift at the rehabilitation center. I showered. I ran a brush through my hair. That is the extent of my preparation for this dinner, because nobody told me it would be catered, or that my mother had already called Aunt Patricia and 2 of my brother's college friends, or that there would be a toast requiring good posture and an expression that communicates joy without reservation. I manage it. I have had years of practice. My mother sets her glass down and reaches across the table to clasp my brother's hand. "Your father would have been so proud," she says, and her voice breaks just enough to invite the kind of emotional agreement that ends conversations before they start. Everyone murmurs and nods. I murmur and nod. My brother's fiancée, a woman named Cassandra with an architecture degree and a laugh like a bell, squeezes his arm and presses her cheek to his shoulder. I think about the overtime I worked last month. 3 extra shifts to cover the shortfall when my mother's car needed new brakes. I did not mention that at dinner. I never mention things like that at dinner. After the food and the toasts and the second round of champagne that I did not finish, the guests drift toward the living room. I begin clearing plates because I always clear plates. My mother appears in the kitchen doorway while I am stacking the dishwasher, her expression carrying that particular arrangement of features that means she has rehearsed something. "We need to talk about the house," she says. I set a plate down carefully. "Okay." She explains it the way she explains most things that are uncomfortable quickly, in the passive voice, as if the decision arrived from somewhere outside herself, and she is simply reporting it. "The wedding will be in June. My brother and Cassandra will need somewhere to start their lives. The house is paid off. It makes sense to transfer it now, while the tax situation is favorable, while everything is straightforward. She has spoken to an attorney." I wait. Something cold settles at the back of my neck. "Of course," she continues. "You're always welcome here. Nothing changes for you, sweetheart." I look at her directly. "Does the transfer include me?" She twists the bracelet on her wrist, a silver chain my father gave her on their 25th anniversary. "Well, you'll want your own space eventually. Everyone does. And with the mortgage paid off, it's really better for the estate, if... So I would be renting from my brother," I say. She flinches slightly. "Not formally. It would just be a contribution. $800 a month, which is well below market rate for this neighborhood. I have contributed exactly $23,400 to this household in the past 3 years. I know this figure precisely because I keep records of everything, a habit I developed in my 2nd year of physical therapy school when I started handling my mother's quarterly bills after my father got sick. I tracked the groceries I bought, the utility bills I covered, the 2 months of mortgage I paid when my mother's disability claim was delayed. I tracked it not because I expected repayment, but because I was raised to be responsible. And responsible people document things. $800 a month. On top of what I already give. It's what adults do, my mother says, which is an interesting thing to say to someone who has been an adult, financially and practically, since she was 19 years old. I nod once. The movement is controlled. I tell her I understand, and I go to bed, and I lie on the ceiling in the dark with the number 3 years forming and dissolving behind my eyes. 3 years since my father passed. 3 years since I moved back to help manage the chaos of his medical debt and the business he had left half-finished, and the mother who could not, initially, open her own mail. I had deferred a job offer in Raleigh to do it. I had told myself it was temporary. Somewhere between the deferral and tonight, temporary became permanent, and I became furniture. In the morning, I open the filing cabinet in my father's old office, which nobody uses anymore because it still smells like him. I am not looking for anything in particular. I am looking the way you look when something doesn't add up and you need to understand the arithmetic. I find my grandfather's name in a folder toward the back. My grandfather, who died when I was 17, who smelled like woodshop and motor oil, who used to drive me to the library on Saturday mornings when everyone else slept in. The folder contains a letter from a firm called Caldwell and Associates, dated roughly 8 months after his death. The letter references a trust account established for the benefit of Natalie Jean Hooper, and outlines the terms of an educational and professional development fund in the amount of $195,000. I read the letter 3 times. I have never heard of this trust. Not once. Not in any conversation, not in any document my mother handed me to file, not in any discussion of my grandfather's estate. As far as I was ever told, my grandfather left his tools to my uncle, his truck to my brother, and the remainder of his modest savings split between his children. I photographed the letter with my phone. My hands are completely steady, which surprises me. I text my Uncle Raymond from the parking lot of a gas station 2 towns over, because I need to make a call I cannot make from inside the house, and I have learned over the years that some conversations require distance. Uncle Raymond answers on the second ring. He is 63, retired from the postal service, and constitutionally incapable of lying to people he loves. He knew your grandfather set something up for you, he says, after a silence that tells me everything I need to know about why this conversation has never happened before. I always assumed your mother told you about it when you turned 21. She didn't, I say. Another silence. Then, come for dinner Thursday. Bring whatever you found. I spend the 2 days before Thursday in a state of methodical calm that I recognize as the same state I enter when a patient is declining faster than expected. Something in me shifts into a gear that has nothing to do with emotion, and everything to do with clarity. I request records from the county probate court. I track down the archived website of Caldwell and Associates, which was absorbed into a larger firm in 2018, and I find a contact email for a retired partner named Douglas Caldwell. I send a polite, precise email. I receive a response within 6 hours. Mr. Caldwell is 71 and lives in Savannah now, and remembers my grandfather with evident warmth. He tells me, over a phone call the following evening, that he drafted the trust documents himself, that my grandfather was explicit about his intentions. The money was for my education and professional development, to be released in installments as I completed degrees and certifications, with the remainder available to me outright at age 25. He tells me my mother held power of attorney over the account after my grandfather's stroke, which preceded his death by 11 months. When did the disbursements begin? I ask. They didn't, he says. The account was liquidated in 2 separate transfers, 14 months after your grandfather's death. He pauses. I always hoped it reached you. I am sitting on a bench outside a public park 3 blocks from my house. A dog runs past, chasing a tennis ball. A child on a bicycle wobbles past a man who reaches out to steady her without breaking his conversation. The world is very ordinary around me. It didn't, I say. I'm sorry, Natalie. I'm truly sorry. That evening, I sit with Uncle Raymond at his kitchen table, while his wife quietly finds reasons to be in other rooms. He shows me what he knows, which is not much. He was not named in the trust, was not a witness, was not told the specific amount. But he remembers my grandfather's intention clearly, because my grandfather told him directly. He did not trust your father's judgment with money, Uncle Raymond says carefully. He liked him fine as a person, but he knew your parents tended to prioritize your brother's opportunities, and he wanted to make sure you had yours without having to ask for them. I lay the Caldwell letter on the table, and what he describes matches the paperwork. Uncle Raymond presses his lips together. He looks at the letter for a long time, then he looks at me. What do you need from me? I need to know if you'll talk to an attorney if it comes to that. He nods without hesitation. The attorney I find is named Helen Park. She is 47, a former county prosecutor, and she has the particular manner of someone who stopped being surprised by human behavior years ago, but never stopped being precise about it. She reviews the documents I have assembled: the probate filing, the Caldwell letter, the account liquidation records I obtained through a formal records request, the bank transfers I traced to a joint account held by my mother, and, as I discover with a sensation like stepping onto ice that cracks underfoot, my brother. He was 22 when the transfers happened, Helen says, which means he was an adult who knew what he was signing. The money funded his first 2 years of college, I say. I can see it clearly in the timing. My brother started at a private university the fall after my grandfather died. My parents had told everyone, that he received a partial academic scholarship, and they covered the rest. Helen nods, making notes. This isn't complicated legally, she says. It's straightforward fraud. The question is how you want to proceed. I don't want to destroy my family, I tell her. I want what was mine. She looks up from her notepad. Those things aren't necessarily incompatible, but you should be prepared for it to feel like they are. I am prepared. I have been preparing, without knowing it, for a long time. The certified letter goes out on a Tuesday. I imagine it arriving. Imagine my mother's face as she signs for it. Imagine the particular sequence of events that follows the phone call to my brother, the phone call to whoever they use as an attorney, the conversation in hushed voices that I am not supposed to hear. I have imagined versions of this scene my entire life. Only previously I was the one being discussed. My phone begins its work that evening. My mother first. Natalie, we need to talk. Please call me back. Then again, an hour later. This is a misunderstanding, sweetheart. You don't understand the whole picture. Then my brother, which surprises me slightly even though it shouldn't. What did you send, Mom? She's really upset. Call me. I note that he asks what I sent. Not why. Not whether I am all right. Not what could possibly have led to this. He asks what I sent. I set the phone face down on my nightstand and sleep better than I have in months. The morning the case is filed, I wake before 5 and sit on the back porch with coffee. The neighborhood is still dark. A sprinkler runs 2 yards over, clicking through its rotation. I feel, for the first time since I found the folder in my father's office, something that is not anger or grief but something cleaner, a kind of reckoning. The knowledge that I see the situation as it actually is, not as I was told it was. My mother's attorney makes the first move 10 days after the filing. He calls Helen to offer a settlement of $65,000. Helen relays this to me over the phone with a neutrality that tells me she thinks it is insultingly low. I agree that it is. The offer climbs over the following 2 weeks. 80,000, 110, 130. Each increase tells its own story about how certain they are that this goes against them in court. The morning before the hearing, my brother calls from a number I don't recognize, which means he knows I won't pick up if I see his name. I answer out of a small, controllable curiosity. He sounds younger than 31. He sounds the way he sounded when we were children, and he had broken something, and was calculating how much trouble was coming. Look, he says, I want you to know I knew there was a fund. Mom said it was being restructured. I didn't know it was your money. I let the silence sit for a moment. What did you think restructured meant? I ask. A longer silence on his end. I don't know, he says finally. I guess I didn't ask. That is the most honest thing you have said to me in years, I tell him, and hang up. The courthouse has the particular atmosphere of a place where many serious things have happened without fanfare. Marble floors and fluorescent lights and the smell of institutional coffee. Helen walks beside me through the main corridor with the steady energy of someone on familiar ground. I have never been inside a courtroom before, and I notice I am not afraid. I am something else, alert, clear-eyed, the same feeling I get when I am reading a patient's chart and I finally understand what the other clinicians missed. My mother and brother are already seated when we enter. My mother is wearing a dark blue blazer I have not seen before. Her attorney, a man in his 50s who looks like he makes a good living settling things before they go to trial, sits close at her elbow. My brother stares at the table in front of him. When my mother sees me, she starts to rise. Helen places one hand briefly on my arm, not stopping me, just steadying, and I cross to our table without making eye contact. The judge is a man in his late 60s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He reviews the filings with the manner of someone who has seen this specific arrangement of facts before, perhaps not in exactly this configuration, but close enough. He asks clarifying questions that are not actually questions. He asks my mother's attorney to explain the account liquidation in relation to my grandfather's explicit documented intent. The attorney explains. The judge removes his glasses and cleans them. When Helen presents the full accounting, the trust documents, the Caldwell affidavit, the bank transfers, the correspondence establishing my mother's awareness of the trust's designated beneficiary, the judge studies each document without expression. He asks me to confirm my grandfather's intent as communicated by Mr. Caldwell. I confirm it. He asks if I am aware of any document in which I consented to the redistribution of the funds. I am not aware of any such document. Because no such document exists, Helen says. My mother's attorney makes one final attempt. He introduces a letter written by my mother, characterizing the family finances during the period of the transfers as a shared resource during a period of hardship. The judge reads it twice. He sets it down. The Bennett family hardship, he says, which does not appear to have extended to the cost of 4 years at a private university. My mother closes her eyes briefly. The ruling is issued that afternoon. Full restitution of the trust amount plus accumulated interest, which brings the total to just over $218,000. Legal fees to be covered by the respondents. The judge adds, and this is the part I did not dare expect, a referral to the county district attorney's office for review of potential criminal liability, given the deliberate nature of the misappropriation and the falsification of estate records that Mr. Caldwell's testimony implies. Helen's face remains neutral. My face remains neutral. Under the table, I press my hands flat against my thighs. Outside on the courthouse steps, the afternoon is mild and ordinary. My mother catches me near the bottom of the stairs. She does not reach for me the way she did that first morning when she saw the certified letter. She stands at a distance that feels learned rather than natural, as if she has finally understood that I will not be held in place by proximity. I made choices, she says. Her voice is flat, in a way I have not heard before. Not performative. I made choices, and I told myself it was for the family, and I knew while I was doing it that you were part of the family too. I look at her. She looks older than she did 2 months ago. I'm not ready to talk yet, I tell her. But I'm not shutting the door. She nods. Just once. Something flickers in her expression that might be relief or might be something harder to name. My brother is waiting beside his car in the parking structure. His jacket is over his arm, and he looks like a man who has just finished a long run, depleted in a particular way that has nothing to do with physical exertion. He does not approach. He raises one hand in a gesture that is not quite a wave, just an acknowledgement, the way you acknowledge someone you have wronged by being simply present in their line of sight. I return the gesture. Then I walk to where Helen is waiting by her car. The criminal referral, I ask. What does that mean practically? It means the DA's office will review what the judge flagged, she says. It could result in fraud charges. Given your mother's cooperation today, and she did cooperate, she may avoid prosecution or receive a reduced outcome. Your brother is a different matter. He was an adult, he signed documents, he received the money directly. She pauses. It means there are consequences, real ones. I drive home along a route that takes me past the rehabilitation center where I work, past the coffee shop where I go on my one morning off each week, past the park where I have walked every spring since I moved back here. I am seeing these places differently now, the way you see furniture in a room when you realize you are about to leave it. I have been looking at a 2-bedroom apartment near the University District for the past month. First floor, south-facing windows, enough space for the drafting desk I have always wanted and never had room for. The lease would start in 60 days. I submit the application from my phone in the driveway before I go inside. Helen calls 3 weeks later with the DA's update. My brother has entered into a negotiated agreement, 2 years probation, mandatory repayment of his portion of the trust funds, and a permanent record that will follow him into any future professional licensing applications. My mother avoids criminal charges in exchange for full cooperation with the restitution process and a formal acknowledgement of the estate misappropriation filed with the probate court. She calls me that evening to tell me herself, before she knows that I already know. Her voice is stripped of everything it usually carries, the careful optimism, the narrative of family harmony she has been composing and revising for 30 years. She says she is sorry. She does not qualify it or contextualize it or explain what she was going through at the time. She says, I am sorry, Natalie. What I did was wrong. I listen. I do not say it is fine, because it is not fine. I do not say I forgive her, because I am not there yet and she does not deserve a forgiveness I cannot mean. I say, I hear you. I will need time. She says, I know. We hang up and I sit for a moment with the phone in my lap. The apartment application was approved this morning. I have already started mentally arranging what I will take and what I will leave. The stuffed animals on my childhood bookshelf, the ones I have kept not out of sentiment but out of inertia, I will leave those. The ceramic pot I made in a community class 2 winters ago, the photo of me and my grandfather at the lake when I was 9, the filing cabinet with 3 years of documented household contributions, those come with me. The move takes one Saturday and the help of 2 colleagues from work and my Uncle Raymond, who lifts boxes without being asked and refuses to be thanked for it. The apartment smells like fresh paint and possibility, and exactly nothing like my childhood bedroom. I stand in the kitchen after everyone has left, and I eat cereal standing at the counter, and I feel, with a completeness I cannot fully explain, like I have walked into a room that has been waiting for me. The money sits in a dedicated account that I manage with the same precision I have applied to everything else in my life. I use a portion to pay off the last of my graduate school loans, which I have been chipping away at for 4 years while simultaneously funding a household that was not mine to fund. The remainder I invest carefully, with the help of a financial advisor who comes recommended by Mr. Caldwell, who has turned out to be the kind of retired professional who treats a case like mine as unfinished business. My grandfather's intent, Mr. Caldwell told me during our last call, was never for this money to be a windfall. It was infrastructure. A foundation for the kind of stability that lets you make choices based on what's right, rather than what you can afford. I think about that word infrastructure every time I review my account balance. Not a gift, not compensation, a foundation. My caseload at the rehabilitation center grows. I am developing a specialty in post-surgical recovery for patients over 65, a population that is frequently undertreated and over-medicated, and grateful for someone who reads their chart twice before entering the room. My supervisor has mentioned the word promotion twice in the past 2 months, each time in a context that makes it clear she is asking a question disguised as a statement. I am considering it, genuinely considering it, not as an obligation or a safe option, but as something I actually want. My brother sends a text in the early fall. It is brief and without excuse. I sold the car Dad left me. I know it wasn't the same thing, but I needed to do something real. I hope you're okay. I read it standing in the produce section of a grocery store, a head of lettuce in my hand. I think about the version of me that would have responded immediately, effusively, relieved at any gesture of repair. That version dissolved somewhere between the filing cabinet in my father's office and the courthouse parking lot. I reply 3 days later, after I have decided what I actually mean. I'm glad you're taking it seriously. That matters. Growth takes time. I'm doing well. I set my phone down and finish making dinner. My mother and I meet for coffee in October, then again in November. We do not speak about the trust or the court or the version of our family we both pretended existed for years. We speak, carefully and with occasional awkwardness, about her watercolor class at the community center, about a patient of mine who learned to walk again at 78, about the way the leaves look along the river this year. We are, with obvious deliberateness on both sides, building something new from the available materials. It is slow. Some days it feels fragile enough that a wrong word would end it. Some days it feels like the most honest thing either of us has ever done. On my grandfather's birthday, I drive to the cemetery with a bouquet of whatever is in season at the market near my apartment, fall dahlias, and something rust-colored that the florist couldn't name for me. The cemetery is quiet in the mid-morning, leaves banked against the older headstones, the kind of stillness that suggests time moving at a different speed. I set the flowers at the base of his stone, and crouch there for a moment with my hand against the granite. You were right to plan ahead, I tell him. I know you didn't want to be right. I know you would have preferred to be wrong about all of it. But you were right, and because you were, I'm okay. The wind moves through the trees above me, unhurried. I stay until the cold starts to settle into my knees, then I stand and brush off my coat and walk back to the car. On the drive home, I pass a park where a group of older men are playing chess at the concrete tables near the entrance. A woman runs past with a dog. A child gestures emphatically at something a parent cannot see. I notice all of this the way I have been noticing things lately, not with the slightly dissociated attention of someone managing a constant low-grade anxiety, but with the particular fullness of someone who is actually present in her own life. Winter arrives, and with it the first anniversary of the day I found the folder. I mark it privately, without ceremony. I sit at my drafting desk with my morning coffee and the yellow light coming through the south-facing windows, and I think about the version of this day last year, the cold at the back of my neck, the photograph of the letter on my phone, 1 year and a folder from a filing cabinet and a string of decisions I made carefully and without drama, and here is what I have. A foundation my grandfather built for me, which I finally have access to. An apartment that is mine in every way that matters. Work that is difficult and meaningful, and increasingly mine to define. A mother who is learning, slowly and imperfectly, to see me as I actually am. A brother who is facing consequences and, from the evidence of his recent communications, beginning to understand why. and a clearer sense of what my grandfather understood before I did, that the most important inheritance is not what someone gives you. It is the knowledge that you were worth giving to, that someone saw what you were capable of before you were old enough to prove it, and made room for the future you hadn't yet reached. I set my coffee down on the desk beside a framed photograph of me at 9 years old, standing in my grandfather's woodshop, holding up a small birdhouse I had just finished painting with entirely too much blue paint. He stands behind me with his hands on my shoulders and his whole face laughing at something. I cannot remember now what was funny, but I remember the weight of his hands, steadying and certain, and the way it felt to be seen by someone who was paying attention. I trace the edge of the frame. Then I open my laptop and begin the work of the day.